Item 6 now is our Woodman Center update with our Neighborhood and Community Services Director, Jennifer Petrozello.
Thank you, Council President Benson. I have just a quick update for the council today on the Woodman Center project overall. I wanted to share with you that over the last couple weeks, I've had an opportunity to join the Friends of the Woodman Center project manager, Sabrina Seiker-Bowerman, in doing a couple of community presentations with service organizations to provide them with an update regarding the project and also to share with them some of the good news that we've had recently with the Friends receiving a $1 million anonymous donation towards the project, which is being earmarked towards the build out of a varsity team room wing at the facility. In other items, I know that our bid documents are essentially done. We've basically completed that design process and are ready to go, just needing to be finished off with our applicable deadlines in terms of when we're going to release those bid documents and when bids will be due. The Jets lease is scheduled for council review tonight, so unfortunately for council, you'll be seeing me back again in a few minutes, where we will be talking about that Jets lease at length. And the state has not yet released the process for pursuing state funding for this project at this time. Just keeping in mind, our next steps for this project after securing that state funding is to issue the bid documents, open the bids, and then we would bring the consideration of awarding a construction contract back to the city council, and we would be looking at potential winter building demolition related to this project. So the demolition and the site utility work beginning yet this winter. That is the brief update for tonight.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Jackson?
Jennifer, two questions quickly. One, I had a constituent call today, and he was inquiring as to how many locker rooms. He felt that perhaps if the Jets had designated locker rooms and the schools had designated locker rooms, there'd be no leftover room for tournaments and people who want to come in and use the facility. So the question is, how many locker rooms is there room for other groups besides the school and the Jets?
Yes, there's definitely room in this facility for other user groups. What we are looking at with the facility design includes a Jets locker room that would be used exclusively by the Jets and will be the subject of our discussion later tonight regarding the lease. There will be what I refer to as our varsity team room wing. Now, that is not to imply that that wing will only be used by our high school varsity teams, but that will provide them with a home base. There are 3 locker rooms in that wing. So we have the Janesville Bluebirds, the Milton High School hockey team, and then we have space available in a 3rd varsity team room. These will be considered not exclusive use by those groups. So what that means is that when we have visiting teams here, whether they be playing one of those high school hockey teams that are based in Janesville, visiting teams for the Janesville Jets, or when we have larger tournaments, those spaces can be made available and will be used by other groups during those times as well. We have a total of 9 additional team rooms that are not full locker rooms, but are places that are going to be hosting the various sports tournaments that will be held in this facility.
Thank you. Second question. I know that there's been a committee and various entities involved with the design. When or if will the council actually look at those designs? We're going to go with bids and et cetera, but when do we actually see the final design ourselves?
Sure. I apologize. I guess I'm stumbling because I thought the council had already seen the design.
The final ones.
The final design, yeah. The design, when the design committee wrapped up their their work. That design was pretty finalized. And then additional design work has been done on some of the interior finishes, more detailed components of the design that are then translated into the bid document. And then that bid document will be released here as soon as we hear regarding our state funding.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
I
Thank you, Jennifer.
should just add, though, if there's any questions about what that design looks like, we've been trying to make that information as open and available to people as we can. We have updated renderings available on the city's website. If anyone is a member of any community organization or service club and would like to have an update, we're happy to come and provide that information and better outline what the floor plan of the facility looks like, as well as the architectural design.
Thank you, Jennifer. That will take us to new business item 1, which is consideration and action on a lease and non-exclusive facilities use agreement between the City of Janesville and Wisconsin Hockey Partners, LLC. And Jennifer Petruzzello, our Neighborhood and Community Services Director, is back with us to present on this item.
Thank you, Council President Benson. Lori, could you return the slide? Tonight, City staff is requesting the council's consideration and approval of a lease and non-exclusive facilities use agreement between the City of Janesville and Wisconsin Hockey Partners. Staff is bringing this agreement to the City Council at this time as part of our preparations for larger consideration of the construction of the Woodman Sports and Convention Center. The proposed lease outlines a capital contribution from Wisconsin Hockey Partners for the facility, as well as establishing minimum operating revenues, that would be in effect in a newly constructed facility, as well as outlining other terms and conditions of the use of these spaces. Wisconsin Hockey Partners is the owner and operator of the Janesville Jets. I may use those two terms simultaneously throughout the conversation, just for simplicity's sake, but I did want to make sure that everyone is aware of that relationship. The Janesville Jets are a community-oriented Junior A hockey league that is based out of the North American Hockey League. They have been based out of Janesville since their inception in 2009 and currently use the Janesville Ice Arena as their home base. The Jets' mission is to develop and advance players, serve and represent the community, and provide affordable family fun. They have 24 players aged 16 to 20 years of age each season. And the Jets players have become a fixture throughout the community, where in addition to their games, they live in the community with host families and average around 2,000 hours of community service each year, as well as generating economic impact for the community and providing community entertainment. The team also hosts camps, clinics that bring other players and families to Janesville. I don't know what's happening with the slides. Not look like that this morning. Just by way of additional background, what you're seeing here is the bird's eye view of the proposed Woodman Sports and Convention Center. So on the left, you have the main level of the facility. On the right, you have the mezzanine level. The City of Janesville, the Janesville Area Visitors and Convention Bureau, and community members have been researching the feasibility of constructing an indoor sports and athletic facility since 2018. We now refer to this facility as the Woodman Sports and Convention Center, or the Woodman Center. It's being designed as the most significant gathering space in Rock County to serve local athletes and residents, attract sports teams and regional and national companies, and organizations for meetings, conferences, and trade shows, as well as special events. This facility on the right side of the main plan includes what is known as the Mercy Health Arena. And that would be an area with a spectator capacity of 1,500 people, including standing room along your mezzanine level, and would provide year-round ice that would be utilized by the Janesville Jets, Janesville Youth Hockey, high school hockey teams, community skating, and other community activities. As I mentioned earlier tonight, design of the facility is essentially complete, and the city is ready to release those bidding documents for the project construction pending state funding for this project. So given that background, it's understandable that the Janesville Jets would like to use a newly constructed Woodman Center as their team home rink following construction of the facility. And we have prepared a proposed 10-year lease for the City Council's consideration. The lease is broken down into activities that would be utilized in a leased space, as well as activities that can be used in a non-leased space. This is a little bit small here, but what you're seeing on the left is, again, that same bird's eye view with the main facility at the top, the mezzanine level at the bottom. And this area shaded in yellow is the area that would be proposed for Jets exclusive space, exclusive use, and is the area that is considered leased space. The remaining facility constitutes that non-leased space, or areas that could be used by other individuals but are also available to the Jets during hockey games, tournaments, camps, and practice times. On the right here, you're seeing a little bit closer look at what is entailed in that leased space area. It would include a team locker room of approximately 1,275 square feet, showing here on the right. Includes a main coach's office at the top of the screen, 300 square feet. This area directly adjacent to the main coach office area would be a 70 square foot storage facility. And then at the bottom of this leased space area, there's a 120 square foot laundry room facility that would be exclusive to the Jets, although they have allowed city weekly use of that laundry facility for our purposes at the arena. One of the key provisions in the lease, and one of the reasons why we're bringing this to the City Council at this time, is that it includes the capital contribution that the Jets would be making for the build-out of their leased space. The lease provisions include a $100,000 initial capital contribution and a $1 per ticket capital contribution fee. That would be collected until a total of $290,000 plus interest was remitted to the city through that ticket contribution fee. That brings the total to a little over $390,000, and that's an amount that's equivalent to the cost of building out the leased space that we just talked about. In addition, the proposed lease covers a number of different operating revenue factors and provisions for the city. Notably, it includes a $100, sorry, it seems way later than this. Apologize that I'm fumbling over words tonight. But it includes a minimum $100,000 advertising sponsorship payment. The city has determined that it would be in our best interest to continue a relationship with the Janesville Jets in securing sponsorship revenues. and this amount is equivalent to what was anticipated the city could collect on our own through a sponsorship program. We think that the Janesville Jets will be able to do better than the city in this area, and have reached an agreement whereby they would grant us a minimum of $100,000 in a sponsorship payment, while including a revenue share if the advertising revenue exceeds a gross revenue of $350,000. Along with this, the Janesville Jets would have all of the staff time dedicated to securing that advertising, and they would incur any expenses related to the advertising materials.
Is that per year, or that $100,000, or is
Yes.
that for the total over 10 years?
No, that is a per year
Okay.
payment. All of these operating revenues that you're seeing here are based on annual rental amounts and revenue amounts. In addition, there's several different categories of ice rental that would be purchased by the Janesville Jets, and the lease establishes a minimum amount of ice rental hours that they would purchase in several different categories, including practice ice, where they would generate almost $44,000 annually in practice ice time. This occurs during the day when that ice might not otherwise be utilized, as well as game ice. Game ice includes a minimum of 28 home games at the prime rental rate of $250 per hour, for a total annual of $30,100 in operating revenue. Camp and tournament ice also is available to the Jets at a prime rate, and that is estimated at $4,000 annually. Under the current agreement, all of the alcohol sales are attributed to the Janesville Jets and Wisconsin Hockey Partners. This new agreement does shift the alcohol license to the city of Janesville, and establishes a revenue sharing as a result of that. We're currently estimating $15,000 in revenue would be provided to the city through alcohol sales. That is based on 25% of net profits from alcohol sales. In addition, and finally, we have facility rent, where the facility rent is proposed at $1,000 per month for, again, that leased space area. All of these revenue sources and rental rates are subject to an annual cost of living increase based on the consumer price increase at the start of each season. And total annual revenues would be guaranteed at over $207,000 per year under the proposed lease. I did want to also mention that Wisconsin Hockey Partners are the owners of a league called the Junior Jets, and they anticipate that they would relocate the Junior Jets to Janesville as well, and that would generate an additional 100 hours of ice time when it's not being used by our other local groups, and increase that revenue by an additional $25,000. It's not included in the lease agreement specifically because they would be treated just like any other user group without preferential scheduling or some of the other preferential items that are associated with the Janesville Jets League. So that would bring total estimated revenue with the Junior Jets, excluding the capital contribution, to $232,350 per year. This compares to an average of $40,000 per year in revenue that's been provided through our current agreement with the Janesville Jets. Other key provisions and important things to consider when you're looking at this lease is that it is for a 10-year term. So this is a long-term commitment on behalf of both the Janesville Jets and the city of Janesville to rent that ice time and to have that time available to the Janesville Jets. The agreement would be in effect, we're estimating that would be in effect July 1 of 2025, or 5 days after the city would obtain occupancy in a new center. So very important that you understand all of the provisions with this new lease are contingent upon the construction of a new Woodman Center. These rates would not be in effect should the project not move forward at the single sheet of ice that we have now. I mentioned earlier that there are also non-exclusive use areas. So these are things like the actual ice sheets, the public restrooms, the lobby spaces, bleachers, I guess, any number of other areas. The Jets would be subject to any reservation policies that might be in place in those areas. So for example, if they were going to utilize the convention space, they would still rent that space like any other party or organization would do in our community. But they would have non-exclusive use of all those other areas during their events and activities. Cleaning and maintenance, very, very common in an agreement like this. Wisconsin Hockey Partners would be responsible for cleaning and maintaining all of their leased facilities, as well as a sponsor suite that's located on the mezzanine level if they were using that during their games, and paying the city for cost to any repairs that might be necessary in non-leased areas if damage was as a result of Janesville Jets activities. Wisconsin Hockey Partners is responsible for their own laundry machine, dryer, office furnishings, and other equipment. Those items are not included as part of the lease, with the exception of the actual lockers themselves, which are being built into the construction contract. Some of you may already know, but the Jets are responsible for providing game security through a minimum of 2 security officers. That would continue under a new lease. And they will include at least 20 free tickets on average to nonprofit organizations or youth from low-income families throughout their season. Other key provisions, we talked mostly here about things that would be provided by the Jets in terms of revenue and capital commitment. But the city also provides services under this lease agreement, particularly in terms of staffing and providing service in connection with the use of those spaces. So we will provide and maintain the ice surfaces, the dasher boards, the ice markings, building utilities, custodial services of all of the common space areas, as well as staff and provide Zamboni services during games and practices and general building maintenance. The contract, as you know, is about 31 pages, so there are lots of other provisions as well, but I'm not going to go through all those tonight unless you have specific questions. The last item I want to mention for your consideration related to this proposal, and one of the factors that we look at when entering into a lease with a partner such as Wisconsin Hockey Partners, is that community economic impact. We've talked about before the estimated annual economic impact associated with the Woodman Center to be over $23 million on an annual basis. Personal earnings growth of over 7.2 million and creation of 228 jobs. When the UW Whitewater Fiscal and Economic Research Center provided us with those economic indicators and numbers in December of 22, they also calculated the direct impact related to the Janesville Jets. So I think it's important for the council to understand that they do bring a lot of people into our community to enjoy those games, and under this proposed lease, they would bring more people into the community through those camps and tournaments. The economic impact directly associated with the Janesville Jets is an annual economic impact of over $1.7 million annually, and personal income growth of over $500,000 on an annual basis. They're able to do this through having a facility that meets their minimum league standards, as well as being able to grow their fan base with that larger spectator capacity and bringing in those additional camps and tournaments into Janesville. So in conclusion, the proposed agreement includes a capital contribution of over $390,000 that would offset the cost associated with building out the Jets lease space. It would secure a formal commitment to annual operating revenues. That's a very important factor in the city's business planning and operations with a newly proposed facility, and it would continue a long-standing partnership with Wisconsin Hockey Partners and the Janesville Jets. It also would allow for the assurance that the community would continue to benefit from the community economic impact generated from this activity. City staff is recommending that the council approve the lease and non-exclusive facilities use agreement between the City of Janesville and Wisconsin Hockey Partners. And a suggested motion is included here.
Open up to questions, and Councilmember Williams, I believe, has one.
Just on one small thing. Let's see, page. I just had it here. Page 8 of the agreement. We'll start out minor with you, okay?
What's that?
We'll start out minor with you. In E, towards the end of E, and also in F, in the third sentence, refers to the Alcohol Licensing Advisory Committee, and except it calls it the Alcohol License and Advisory Committee. There's no and in the middle. It's the Alcohol License Advisory Committee. It's on page 8. E, towards the, let's see, the fourth line from the bottom. And then in F, the third line to the right. If not, I'll show you later. That's just mine.
So you're in section F, parent 1
On page 8.
on
let's
page
see.
8.
It's under WHP Rights and Responsibilities, and then the third page of that, page 8, and
Yes.
under F. But, more questions.
So there were two, I'm sorry, so there were
There's
two
two places
places
that
where
it
the Alcohol
refers-
License Advisory Committee
And they put
was
an and in the middle.
incorrectly
So,
described.
just
Okay,
a little thing.
got it.
Under the term of the contract, under, it says that, let's see, it can be renewed but not to exceed 10 years under a renewal. So does that mean that this contract could only be renewed one time, so it would just be a maximum of 20 years?
Under this agreement, yes. And so what would happen is that a new lease agreement would need to be entered into at the conclusion of a second 10-year extension.
Getting back to the, if you are familiar with the request for the alcohol, right now, the Jets have a Class B only license at their facility. This seems to state that they want to request either, is it a full Class B, which would include beer and liquor?
So
That's what it says.
the intention is that because, and Lori, please help me out here if I make a mistake. She's our expert with alcohol licensing as well as WALD. But the intention is that because an alcohol license, you can only have one license per facility. And this facility has, in addition to the Mercy Health Arena and the known desired use of the Jets to serve beer, we would anticipate that there will be events that will be hosted in the multi-purpose convention space that may also have a desire to have alcohol sold and available to them. For example, it might be a Forward Janesville dinner or a business convention that wants to have an after conference hour. And so exploring a full license would allow for those opportunities.
So I guess what you're saying is, besides the city of Janesville being in the ice arena business and the convention business, under this agreement, we'd also be in the tavern business. Because we don't have a license, the Jets hold the license there. This is requesting that the city of Janesville get an alcohol license.
Yes.
And run an alcohol establishment, is that correct?
So the city would be the license holder, but under this agreement, the Jets would still be the individual agency responsible for ensuring that we have licensed bartenders on site that are selling those alcoholic or beer out of the concessions area during their events.
But as the licensed holder, if you want to ask either Lori or Wald, who still is responsible for that? Is not the license holder, besides the servers, the license holder is going to be responsible being the license holder, correct?
Right, the license holder.
Okay, that answers that question. Go,
May I just ask, it's in regards to this, would this open up liability or set precedents if the city is holding a license for another entity? I mean, if that's the first time we've done it, does that not send a message that we are able and potentially willing?
I don't think that it sets precedent. I think this is a fairly unique facility that would be city-owned, municipally owned, where we would be the only one in a position to be able to facilitate the consumption of alcohol throughout the entire facility.
But we aren't. The hockey organization is.
They will be granted the ability to do that during their events and their times.
It says in there that they have exclusive use. I'm sorry, Paul.
go ahead.
During their events. So the Janesville Jets will not be selling alcoholic beverages for a non-Jets related event held elsewhere in the facility.
Okay, I'll get back to that. I have another question or correction. Under 3, use of the premises, under D,
What page?
that would be page 6 in the middle, item number D. Starts out, WHP may be responsible for reimbursing the city for the cost to repair non-structural damage to the non-lease portions of the facility if the damage is the result of WHP activities. Why does it say they may be responsible? I guess, speaking on behalf of the citizens of Janesville, the taxpayers, if they were the ones that caused the structural damage or the damage, why is it may? Shouldn't it be they shall be responsible?
I think it could be, but I think what's envisioned here is that there may be damage that is difficult to determine who ultimately caused that damage.
Well, it says here, if the damage is the result of their activities. But I just have a question on why if that is damaged as a result of their activities, why they may be responsible. Any answers to that? Maybe city attorney? Is it may or should it be shall?
If you want it definitive, you're right, it should be like must or shall.
I will give up my time at this moment, but I do have a couple others coming back, but I'll let others.
We can, You want to finish your questions?
No, I got to regroup.
Okay. Any other questions?
Sure. And just a couple things with the may shall thing. I think, so may gives us the opportunity to envision, we can't envision everything that happens. Let's say the Jets break a window because they're trying to save someone's life, getting them out to an ambulance. You know, do we charge them for that? Because may gives us the ability to decide. And that's an extreme example, but you can't envision every scenario. But I'm not going to die on that hill, but that's my thought. As far as the full liquor license, I see the challenges that you talk about, but if we're going to rely on conventions, we need to do that. We need to find a way to make that work. Because if you have conventions and you tell them, hey, come to see us, can't have a bar, we can serve you beer only, you're going to miss out on some conventions. So we got to figure it out. And I see there's challenges there, but we need to figure that out. Just a couple questions that I have. So the operating revenues of roughly 232,000 estimate. How does that compare to what we looked at when we first did the pro forma for the operating plan? Do we know? I mean, is that and I don't need specifics, is it in the ballpark of what we
Yeah.
expected?
Yeah, it would definitely be in what we were expecting. The business plan included an estimated $100,000 to the city for advertising revenue, so
Okay.
that amount is equivalent.
Yep.
At the initial time that the business plan was put into place, the anticipated rental rates were a little bit higher, but here the hour guarantees are a little bit higher.
Okay, so it's roughly the same.
And-
It's not significantly different.
Yeah,
That's all I
yeah,
need to know.
yeah. And that prime rental rate has also increased with inflation.
Okay. The capital contribution over time, the $1 per ticket, I think I read somewhere 8 years-ish, they anticipate to
I think that would be on the long
the long
side.
side. So how is that, where does that money funnel to? Is it going into a capital fund for the facility?
Good question.
Because we're building it, right? It's
Yeah.
gonna be done, we're not gonna use it to build it.
Yeah.
So where's that 290,000 gonna go?
So the initial 100,000 would be considered capital contribution that would result in less borrowing
Right.
for the project. The ticket fee would be returned to the city and used directly to offset our debt service payment.
Perfect.
So that interest rate that's referred to related to the ticket payment will be based on the actual interest rate that we incur when the city actually does their borrowing.
Perfect, that's great. The last question, so this is a big jump for the Jets, from 40,000 to a lot more, 232 plus the capital. In my world, with a lease of this significance, we do some due diligence, right? We look at the organization, can they afford this large increase? Have we done any due diligence on the Jets to see that this is viable for them?
I would say yes. I think when, in one way we look at that is through the business planning. And we look at what the number of spectators are per event. We compare that to where they are now. We can make projections on how likely that growth in fan base is going to be. We can see they have a history already of how many games they do, and the minimum is 28. If they have any playoff games, it goes beyond that. Practice time is kind of a known quantity. That's not changing. What's changing is the rate that they're paying for is increasing. And they have plans to be able to recover that through items such as, their increased sale of tickets,
So
for example, and the increased camps and
Sure.
tournaments.
Did they provide any kind of business plan projections, or is it all stuff that we did internally?
They participated in the business planning process with the city, so answering questions that our business planners had for them.
Okay. Just as a general practice, I think it would be good to, and not formally in the lease, but, annually just meet with them. It's a big jump for them, and we're relying on this. We just need to make sure that it's working for them. So, That's all I had.
Councilmember Jackson.
Jennifer, you have had to do a lot of work, and I appreciate it. I'm gonna ask you a question I'm not sure that you'll be able to answer. Initially, we thought that this would result in a hit upon the city of $17 million. Would this lease impact that bottom line one way or another? Does it help us? Was this the amount we expected from the Jets? Is this more or less?
I think that, when we did the original cost estimating, the core and shell of the Jets space was included in that $50.3 million number that you've heard us talk about. What wasn't included was the building out of that space, and this agreement is what provides the funding to build out that space. And that means things like the floor and the plumbing and the bathroom fixtures and the ceiling and the electrical and everything that you would expect in that space. So that, I guess that's equivalent, right? So the cost might go up a little bit, but this should be offsetting the cost associated with that. And we didn't have a specific Jets contribution carved out towards the 50.3 million. We've always talked about them funding the build out of their space.
So if I'm hearing you correct, it's a wash. We're not seeing any.
From a capital standpoint, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember Nino?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's always been my understanding that it is likely, if not the intent, to have an outside party operate the facility.
Well, both the feasibility study and the business plan did recommend city management of the facility, but we have committed to doing a management review and soliciting proposals from management companies following a city council award of a construction project as part of that additional due diligence to see what those costs and benefits would be in private management versus city management.
That would then involve their control of a liquor license, no different than the golf courses.
That would be subject to negotiation in how that might look.
But it's done that way currently with outside contractors.
I don't have the details of how the golf course agreement is, but yeah, it can be set up that way. It could be set up in other ways. This agreement would allow the Jets the 75% of the net revenues related to
That's not
alcohol.
my concern. It's just, the issue is who holds the license? Does the city hold it? And if in fact there were an outside company
Gotcha.
charged with operating it, they would then
Sure.
be able to hold the license, and then the city wouldn't have to be involved.
I understand your question better now, and that is an option as well.
Yeah, next, Councilmember Burdick.
Have we, such as other stakeholders like Janesville Youth Hockey, is there any negative impact with this lease on their club or ice time or facilities that they can use, anything like that?
I don't see any negatives to other user groups as part of this agreement.
And they're familiar, kind of, this is similar setup to what they currently have, just a little bigger, better?
Well, I mean, there are some differences with other user groups. Currently, the Janesville Jets have 100% of the advertising rights at the current facility, and this establishes that minimum sponsorship payment back to the city for that. Currently, Janesville Youth Hockey operates concessions at the existing ice arena, and that responsibility would transfer to the city under a new facility.
So, okay, I know we're not voting on the facility and contracts, we're just talking about the lease here, but since you brought it up, so Janesville Youth Hockey looking at getting cut out of concessions then?
And with the initial business planning, Janesville Youth Hockey did not wish to continue to do concessions. Since that time, there's been some interest in maybe being a partner in that model. So as we look towards third-party management of the facility, we'll also consider whether it makes sense to have a management contract related to concessions. And a very common model under that scenario, as well as could be done under city ownership, is to utilize volunteers from youth organizations or other community organizations to staff that concession stand during events in exchange for a flat payment or percent of revenue for that evening. So they have expressed some interest in wanting to explore that, should we go that route.
And
Go ahead, City
I
Manager
can
Later.
just add a little bit too, is that initially, as Jennifer said, their plan was to move to like more of a tournament model. As it's gotten closer to being a reality, they've come back to us that that might not work exactly for us. And so we've had meetings with them and we've agreed to work with them on establishing what they need to do in order to make sure that they're, maintained whole. As they shift, they're planning to shift eventually to a more heavier tournament model, just because the concession is a heavy burden on them with the number of volunteers they have to do. But we've just agreed to work with them to ease them into that transition.
Thank you.
I have a question on the $100,000 payment. And I'm struggling to find the language in here. Is that guaranteed? Like, do we get the first dollars that go to us, or do they have to meet a certain number for us to get that $100,000 a year for 10 years?
For the advertising sponsorship, they're required to provide us with $100,000 per year.
Okay, no matter what.
Correct.
And that
It's-
adjusts by CIP.
Yeah, it's structured over 2 payments during their season,
Sure.
50,000 each payment. But that is a guarantee.
It's on page 7, and that's D2, if you're looking for it.
Okay, thank you. Other questions about the lease?
Under that, on page 13, Woodman's Center improvements, I don't understand the part, it says the WHP will make the minimum initial capital contribution of $100,000 to the city of Janesville. But then it says the contribution may be provided through the Friends of the Woodman Center capital campaign. What does that mean? Does that mean people that have donated to build the ice arena to the Friends of the Woodman's Center that donated that money, give it to the Jets to pay the $100,000?
No, that means that the Janesville Jets could write the check for $100,000 to the Friends group, who would transfer it to us.
And that's so
Oh.
they get a write-off? Okay, just put it out there. One other, and I'm not sure why it's this way. On page 23, the notice, if there's some kind of a notice that's going to be going to the city on whether or not we've got a problem with the contract or whatever, can you explain why the notice, if it goes to the city, would either go to the recreation director with a copy to the ice arena manager? I would think that normally this should go to the city manager and the city attorney.
The current agreement is directly to the ice arena manager. So this was an effort to ensure that that was going back to the division head within the city organization, who would have responsibility for overseeing
I would think that,
operations at a Woodman Center.
I would think that we'd be better protected, and we have a very good recreation director now, but 20 years from now or 10 years from now, I'm not sure who we have, but as far as we keep going here with 100 years of city manager, we're going to have a city manager. And I'd hate to see that the we got a notice in the mail to the recreational director, and it never got forwarded to the city manager. So again, it might just be me, but I would think that it would be best to be sent to the city manager and the city attorney. I think that's all the corrections or questions that I have. I do just want to state, we got this Friday morning, this 30-some page agreement or lease. I'm not sure with the other research that I've had to do that I'm ready to say yes or no on this. And one of those reasons, of course, is for the short period of time to review it. But the other thing is that I'm not sure why this has to be as complicated as it is. I'm not sure why we just didn't have a bottom dollar amount on how much they're going to be paying for doing these games, where we have to look at, we get $1 for every ticket is going to come to us. We get a percentage of this, we get a percentage of that. I need to review it more before I feel comfortable voting on this. So that's where I stand at this moment. Thank you.
Councilmember Jackson, so you're next.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the lease and non-exclusive facilities use agreement between the City of Janesville and Wisconsin Hockey Partners LLC as proposed.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor by Jackson, a second by Nito. I'll get you, Councilmember Miller, but Councilmember Jackson, anything further on your motion?
Appreciate all of the work that's been done. Jennifer, all that you provided us, I think we're ready to vote.
Councilmember Nito, anything further?
Very much so. It's obviously a tremendous amount of work. Congratulations and thank you. I think it's a very positive lease and will be beneficial to the city.
Councilmember Miller?
Well, I guess it is my turn. Jennifer, I have some questions. I see that the Jets would have, per the lease agreement, exclusive right to sell and keep all the revenue from advertising up until that plateau. Alcoholic beverages, they get discounted rates for ice, all the camps, all the clinics. And I know that we've put emphasis on the non-exclusive space. However, when they have those camps and clinics and games, it becomes exclusive space. Are we really okay with that? Because there are 2 sheets of ice. And if we have another youth group or another organization who is utilizing that additional rink at the same time, they're no longer permitted to use those spaces per the lease, per the wording. And I'm talking about section F, page 15. So you can have your game, youth hockey game, but don't go in these certain spaces. And I just feel like as a community-based organization, now we're telling people you can and cannot use certain spaces.
Don't think that's what is intended by that section. So when for example, you gave an example of when there's a Janesville Jets game happening, we will still be utilizing the multipurpose arena and the flexible space, convention space for other activities. Lobby areas will all still be open and available.
When it says reservation for ice time for a game, camp, or clinic includes exclusive use of game official rooms, concessions, sponsor suite, trainers' rooms, visitor locker rooms, lobby, public restrooms, etc. All of the non-exclusive spaces.
Couldn't any user group do that, though? Not just the Jets?
Yeah.
I mean, couldn't
Yeah.
youth hockey reserve all those spaces, too? I think it's a scheduling thing, right?
But when they mention
Yeah, this-
during a game or a clinic, or they get to have exclusive use,
So,
it's expressively included.
so this is a section that's referring to the scheduling section. And so that would envision things like, if you have a clinic and it's 2 sheets of ice, then you would reserve and you would utilize 2 sheets of ice during that time. If you, reservation of ice time for a hockey game. What it's saying is that it's including the use of those non-leased spaces are available to them for a game. So the Jets wouldn't have a camp and then they wouldn't be able to use the public restrooms. Those public restrooms in that non-leased space are always going to come with a reservation of ice for those other purposes.
But non-exclusively.
Correct.
Okay. In section 10, they talk about scheduling, page 14. They say they have that the Jets have first rights on scheduling. Do we have an example now of what that looks like in comparison to what our community kids are having to schedule around? I know that there's been talk that these are all off-peak hours, but at the same time, a lower rate doesn't change the fact that your lights are on, your heat, your air conditioning, your cleanup, everything is the same, whether it's daytime or nighttime. And I'm just wondering, I want to make sure that we're not cutting our community kids short.
What page are you on?
Page 14, section 10, under scheduling.
And the question is about,
Do we know what their scheduling looks like to get an idea if this is really going to benefit our kids?
so there's a sampling schedule that was done and completed as part of our business plan. With the 2 sheets of ice during peak time is going to have a significant difference in terms of the availability for use by all of the groups, including our local youth and our high school hockey teams. So we have a pretty good idea of what that's going to look like and know that we'll be able to serve both in that situation.
Did all
The-
stakeholders get to see that schedule?
And if I could just add to the part of the reason why there is a reduced rate and non-peak rate is because there is significantly less involvement and commitment of staffing during those times. So there aren't any other users. The ice is there. It's 2 hours of practice a day during the week, but we don't have to fully staff it like we do for a tournament or camp or a youth hockey game where you're doing more ice makes and you have more people in the facility. So there are lower expenses during those non-peak times.
I will say, it does also say the WHP will meet with other user groups at the rink to identify, resolve any conflict dates prior to the finalizing of the schedule.
One of the things we did with this agreement was we made those deadlines for submitting the Jets schedule earlier in the year, so that information would be available sooner, and would be better able to facilitate the scheduling of our other user groups.
Call for the question.
Question has been called for, and there's a motion on the floor. So we have to vote, follow the Roberts rules, I believe. Is that correct, Walt? The question's been called for?
I think you would take a vote on whether to call the question. The council's practice has been to call the
Okay.
question upon any motion.
If the question's been called, then I'll stick with that. And so I have a motion by Jackson, a second by Nino, I believe. Please vote.
No.
Let me reset. I might have started a little. It's been on the screen a while here.
That motion passes 5-2. Burdick, Jackson, Nino, Marshak, and Benson in favor. Miller and Williams opposed.